Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Amy Burkett. As a mom of a teenager, teen suicide is a tough topic to talk about. No one thinks their son or daughter could do such a thing. How do they go from being an occasional meenagers to feeling their life has no meaning? The number of youth suicides in North Carolina has doubled since the start of the decade. According to data released by the North Carolina Child Fatality Task Force, nearly 50 children died by suicide last year, compared to about 20 in the year 2010. Carolina Impact's Danielle Koser tells us more.
I'm so tired, and I'm sick of feeling lonely like.
Behind the curtain, they're just teens being teens.
We all have secrets.
On stage, these 7 cast members come together to shed light on some serious issues.
Self-harm, sexuality, divorce. If we can bring awareness to these issues, then we'll save some lives.
The production is called Breaking the Moon. Writer and director Amy Steinberg says she set out to capture the pressures teens face, the same pressures she once felt.
There were definitely times I didn't want to live as a teenager.
Amy's fingers strum the guitar as she sits stage left. The chords, a backdrop to a catchy song with a powerful message.
Self-help therapy, overdose on anti-D, staring to the TV screen. And
I've cried a couple times over this show. It can be very overwhelming.
The cast hopes Breaking the Moon can help break the stigma surrounding teen suicide.
They're just opening people's eyes to the fact that, like, this is real and it's happening.
And send a message of hope to those who are struggling.
I hope that they realize it's okay to ask for help and that you should ask for help, and that if they're struggling with any of these things, that they just need to hold on and that it will get better.
When one child commits suicide, it affects an entire community.
Gone, but not forgotten. Family photos help Alice McGinley remember the life of her baby boy.
I was lucky to be that kid's mom for 16 and a half years, and he was lucky to be our son. And if that's all that I was going to get, you know what? I wouldn't have changed one thing, even knowing the outcome. I would not have changed one day with my son.
Alice never got the chance to tell her son that his tomorrow may have been a little brighter. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, suicide is the second leading cause of death for youth between the ages of 10 and 24. More teenagers and young adults die from suicide than from cancer, heart disease, and birth defects combined. A devastating loss, shattering a parent's vision for their family. The McGinley family moved to Charlotte during Danny's freshman year, and he seemed to be adjusting well.
He made friends here pretty easily.
An athlete, he earned a spot on the football and hockey teams. But during his sophomore year at Charlotte Catholic, Danny hit a rough patch, suffering several concussions while playing sports, then sustaining a traumatic brain injury in a rollover crash. His parents say he was different after that, dealing with short-term memory loss, trouble concentrating, and difficulty sleeping. 7 months into recovery, Danny took his own life.
I felt like something was off. I went upstairs and checked on Danny, and I found him in the attic. He was hanging in the attic.
Alice spent 2 years fighting her way through intense grief. Then, using her training as a counselor, she set out to help others, starting a nonprofit called HUGS, short for Healing and Understanding of Grief from Suicide.
The gift I got from the loss of my son is that I can pay it forward, so maybe somebody else doesn't have to ever be in my position.
Sophia DeJoya shares a similar story of loss. A small charm hanging around her neck tells a big story. It used to belong to one of her best friends, who completed suicide after being cyberbullied.
Everything changed. I would see something that would remind me of her, and I would just get so down, and for a while I didn't know what to do with myself.
Shortly after, Sophia joined Davidson Lifeline, a nonprofit focusing on suicide prevention and mental health awareness.
It allowed me to help people that were going through the same situation that I was.
The group formed in 2014, just 2 years after Davidson experienced 5 suicides and 12 attempted suicides, 5 times the national average. 2 of those who completed suicide were high school students. Now, Sophia volunteers as a student representative for the group, working to turn something painful into something positive.
And because of this experience, it's helped me become more aware of what's going on and try to prevent things like this from happening again.
Whatever's hiding shows up on the outside.
A little song and dance with a serious message. These teens hope the production helps prevent more young lives cut short by suicide.
I admit it, I wanted to die.
For Carolina Impact, I'm Danielle Koser reporting.
Thanks so much, Danielle. Joining me now is Sal Carrico with Mental Health America of Central Carolinas. Sal, let's talk a little bit more about teen suicide. How do we recognize the warning signs as parents and friends?
Well, there's a couple of things. Actually, there's a number of different things. First, some of the classic warning signs are just a change in the child's behavior. Giving away prized possessions is one that we typically look at. If somebody has been sort of in a downward swing, been in a sort of what we might describe as a depression, and all of a sudden seem to be really like have emerged from that and sort of elated, that could potentially be a sign as well.
Okay, teenagers, I have one at my house. They're all kind of in the, in the doldrums sometimes. They all just kind of live in that state of slow. How do we know the difference between this is a normal brooding teenager to we've got a real serious issue on our hands?
That's a great question. There's a couple of things. One is typically with adolescent behavior, there's some bit of a separation at one point from mom and dad and some of the other family members. But when they kind of separate from friends, then that might be a potential sign. Some of the things that we can do as parents, as adults, as grandparents, as teachers, is particularly for parents, is to provide a good, solid environment for the child where they feel safe, where we're having conversations with the child, real conversations, and listening to the child or to the young person, and taking them seriously.
So once we recognize some of the signs, how can we intervene? If we see some signs that are very troubling, what's the best way to intervene?
I think probably the best way to intervene is to, again, have a conversation with that child. Ask questions and be prepared to hear whatever it is that child wants to hear without judging anything that they're saying. Take them seriously. Do a lot of listening. We talk about I statements, so if you're my 14-year-old daughter, I'm going to say, I'm concerned about you. I've noticed some things in your behavior that's given me some concern. Tell me what's going on in your life. And then to do a lot of listening. And again, non-judgmental listening. Let the young person say whatever it is that they need to say. And then, remind them that, thoughts of suicide are relatively common, but we don't need to act on them. The other thing to remind the child or the young person, the child, is there's help for folks. There is some hope. So you want to give some reassurance.
We've all heard the phrase CPR, and we know that can help someone having a heart attack. But you have 3 letters, QPR. What does that do for children, teenagers?
QPR actually is an evidence-based best practice, came out of Spokane, Washington. And QPR stands for Question, Persuade, Refer. And it does similar to CPR. It allows us to address a situation in a real concise, clear way. And it reminds us to ask the questions and be direct about that question. Are you having thoughts of suicide? Now, you're not going to come out of the box and say that. You kind of set that up as you're kind of peeling an onion sort of thing. And after you've asked that question, and then the persuade is we want to persuade that person to stay alive. So we have to interject some sort of hope with that person and let them know that there are, that they can get some professional help. And that gets it into the R, which is refer.
Who would we refer them to?
There's a number of places. Mobile Crisis would be one of them. And they're a 24-hour day, 7-day a week, and they're manned by licensed clinicians, and they can come to the site and talk with a person and triage a situation. If they're in a school, they can talk to their guidance counselor. If there is imminent danger, like if I'm talking to a young person and I'm asking if they have some thoughts of suicide and they say yeah, and I'm going to ask, well, have you have a plan? And they're going to talk a little bit about that plan. And if they say to me, yeah, I think I'm going to use this gun that I have in my purse or my backpack, at that point then the referral is going to I'm going to leave the room and call 911.
Immediately.
Yeah.
Sal Caruso, we are so appreciative of this information. Being a parent of a teenager, it's hard to get through to them, and having the right information can be the difference between life and death. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.